So my name is Dashus Navnul. That is the name of my planet and my identity on the Urbit network. Urbit is the really technical term would be a solid state interpreter. And what it is largely more than anything else is that it's a complete rewrite of the current software stack. Uh, the Linux kernel is about 5 million lines of code, whereas the Urbit knock kernel can fit on a t-shirt. And we, in fact, do have t-shirts for that. It is an entirely new kind of internet, reimagined from the ground up, knowing what we have learned over the past 20 years of social media and platforms and how they operate. And this is an entirely new kind of internet that it actually predates blockchain technology. The project was started as a thesis or as a doctoral thesis sometime in 2003. So I first heard about Urbit when I must have been 22, and I started getting seriously into it sometime in 2016, 2017. And then I was offered an internship at Tlon, the main corporate vehicle for the Urbit project, some time last year around June. And now I work full time for the Dalten Collective. Rabsef, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'd be happy to. As you said, I came onto Urbit in around 2019. I saw it as a way of expanding my exposure into computer science. I was working at a law firm at the time. I'm classically trained as an attorney, and I wanted to get into development. I had been doing some development at my law firm to like expedite and automate things that we were doing, but Urbit presented to me a clean interface for starting computer programming and working more closely with the computers that I work with on a daily basis to make them do what I want them to. And it's been a really productive endeavor thereafter. So now I work full-time writing software for Urbit, filling out some of the software space that will make the system viable and profitable for people who are using it. Does that cover Dashus? I hope.
Yeah. And to just to clarify a little bit more about what Urbit is a purely functional self-contained operating system. So it is both a computer. It is a digital server that is also a computer in one. So a very brief overview of it is that the Urbit network is a federated system with galaxies being able to produce stars, being able to produce planets. And each of these are fully functional computers that you own sovereignly to the same degree as you would own your own Bitcoin. There's no way that anyone can take it away from you. It's legally yours in a very real sense. I'm debating if I should go forward. Did you have any specific questions, Smeddy? Or any, because a couple people here have heard me talk about Urbit before, but did you have any questions specifically you wanted to get into?
I mean, I guess one for me that stands out is like sometimes I've seen Urbit referred to as an operating system. I've seen it referred to as a blockchain. I've seen it referred to as a personal server. And so, I mean, as a let's say I'm a user coming in, like, how would I be? You know, are you are you running on hardware? You know, are you an operating system that I can use on standing computers or phones, or like as a product itself? Where do I, if I wanted to kick off an Urbit tonight, how would I go about it?
So Urbit is an operating system, and it is also a personal server. It is not a blockchain. The identity system Azimuth is kept on the Ethereum blockchain for right now, but we're not married to that. And in fact, there is another Urbit startup creating an Urbit native blockchain called Ukbar, which hopefully will move a lot of the address space onto that. So if you wanted to go purchase a Urbit Planet right now, you could go on Urbit Live and purchase it. It's a little bit expensive right now because of the Ethereum gas fees. But now that the L2 solution is out, you should be able to find planets. I'm not even sure what the going price is now, less than $20, I imagine, for planets on L2.
Justin Murphy's giving them away right now at
Oh, that's right, he is.
Computer. If you wanted one, that would be the place that you would get one. And just like brass tacks to answer a few of your other questions, Urbit currently has a like a runtime environment that you can run on Unix systems and Windows now, and Mac, of course, is the Unix system. And effectively, the runtime environment can be run against any what we call a peer, which is effectively just a file or a folder containing the information that's required to run your Urbit. So that folder is transportable. You could take it to any operating environment you wanted it in and run the runtime against it. And effectively how Urbit works is it's this function that's run over a tree of data. The tree of data is your persistent data. That's kind of why it's referred to as a server. There's this element of persistence to it and an element of separateness where your data is housed in this deterministic function that's run repeatedly over the tree to enact various effects or enact various changes and produce various effects that it can send to either other Urbits or the classical Earth web, as we'd call it. It's also, just one last note there, it's also very easy to get on Urbit quickly. There's a project from Twan, the core development team of Urbit, called Port, and Port is I don't know what Dashus might know what operating systems it runs on. I think it runs on Windows and in maybe all of them. I don't know, but you can download Port immediately and boot what's called a Comet. A Comet does not have blockchain like verified identity. It's like a mined identity, so it's just a large number outside of the band of confirmed address space. And you could get that started today without paying for anything. Although you could also get it from Justin Murphy, like I said.
So I'll hit him up. So two questions I have before maybe opening up to anyone else is, well, first one is, I saw somewhere, but I'm going back a few months probably, that there's a hard limit on how many sort of galaxies, stars, planets could be mined, or at least could exist. But I imagine, I thought that's a number like 10 billion or something, which could be the most that could ever be sustained. But am I right on that? Or I'm just going to watch population growth over the next 10 years?
Well, we don't really use the term mining. You can mine a comet, but a comet is like a throwaway identity. It's not really, it's not something that one would, an Urbit planet is designed to last you the rest of your life. And Urbit, a comet is just it's something like a bot if you needed to make a bot or something. So the hard limit. So all of the planets that will ever exist already exist. The number is 4.2 billion planets. And the obvious point when this gets brought up is that it oh, sorry, I was just looking at the chat. The obvious point where this gets brought up is that that is less than the total number of people on Earth. And here's why this is not a problem. The first response to that is Facebook has 2.4 billion users. So in the scenario, when people criticize Urbit for having a limited user space, those critics are already assuming that we are bigger than Facebook. So I hope that we have that problem. In the other aspects of that is Urbit is not a toy. It is a tool for a responsible adult. It is a car in this sense. It is because Urbit is an identity that you carry with you for the rest of your life, and your behavior using this identity is valuable. Meaning, so on a very basic level, let's say that you are selling things on eBay with your Urbit identity attached to that, and everyone can see the records of your different transactions that you have done on eBay. If you start scamming people on eBay, that Urbit, that identity will lose reputation. And which though it remains anonymous, so it will remain anonymous, but still accrue reputation. So the reason I say that is not everyone will need an Urbit, and in fact, giving your 12-year-old kid an Urbit planet might not be a very good idea, because he is almost guaranteed to go do something stupid on it to hurt his reputation. So this limited address space is not really an issue.
Oh yeah, I wasn't calling it a. I was just trying to get a space look at the landscape, if you like. But like you say, your 17-year-old gets their driving license, and what do? They go and put 6 points on it straight away. Like it's responsible adult territory.
I don't know.
Yeah, so
Continue.
like jump. You still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So jump forward 10 years, and it's a best case scenario, right? Like, how would take for me. I use sort of Windows in my day to day and for work, and then Android on my phone. For that side of life, how would the world look if it went extremely Urbit in years to come? Does that make sense as a question?
I can give you an interesting example of. I'll answer your question, but first I'm going to contrast it with what is going to happen if Urbit does not work. So I don't know if you heard about this, but it got leaked that Microsoft Windows 11, that they're experimenting with putting ads in the file tabs. So when you go to open up your own Microsoft, like you go to the Windows OS to open a program, and in the drop-down menu, or it will show you ads within your own operating system, and that is where everything is going if you don't control your own tools. And one of the key things that the Urbit community talks about is the difference between tools and machines that you interact with. So that's just increasing loss of control of all of the so-called tools that you use in your everyday life. That's what 10 years down the line happens if Urbit or fail, Urbit or something like it doesn't succeed. So this is the part where it starts sounding grandiose, but the truth is that 10 years from now, I would like to see, I could see Urbit being the dominant operating system in the Western world. And I could see a lot. I really could see that owning your own data and owning and being able to control the tools, the digital tools that you use, could be the West's answer to Eastern centralization and 5G. And the way that China is building out, their Belt and Road throughout Africa, and a good chunk of Africa now just runs off of Chinese internet, which is all very, very, very centrally controlled and censored. I could see Urbit becoming the West's response to that.
First off, mother flippers if it goes that way. I mean, you're dead right? It's absolutely in the waters. So in a way, it's a fight for decentralized operating systems in one sense.
It's really just a fight for controlling your online presence and your online identity, and having the right to own that identity more than anything else. Rabsef, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about it. I am doing a talk later this week about Urbit and my experience as a developer on it. And one of the things that I'm talking about is how when I was born in 1985, and PDAs like the Casio Boss and other devices like that, the Palm devices later on, kind of were always in the zeitgeist for me. And they represent one modality of computing, which is like having organized data that is important to you available at your fingertips to augment your everyday life to make it easier. And there's this sort of other modality of sort of creeping, encroaching technology that I sort of I pose in opposition to that modality, and that is kind of the modern world to me, where the device is everything. It's the way that you communicate with everyone. You don't see them. You don't, and you also don't control the device so much anymore, as it provides ways that you have to communicate through it. Anyway, the idea is sort of not fully formed, but effectively the fight for me about Urbit is the fight between prescribed computing and computing at my will, and I choose the latter.
I like that, right? We're not slaves to the machines, but there are servants. Like, so I mean, like, so in a sense, my Urbit ID, is that the right term? Like it would be something I'd probably have in multiple touch points. Would that be right? Like I could use it to validate myself, or I could be using it
Yeah,
as a way.
There's tooling for that already out there. There's a team called DC Spark, and they're providing sort of like Earth Web. I'm not a huge JavaScript guy, so the way to frame this eludes me a little bit. I'm an Urbit maximalist in that way, but they're providing ways to allow you to log in via your ship to various other Earth Web portals that are available. So the idea would be that, yeah, you would be able to authenticate with what we would call your PAT-P, or your identity, or your ship name, or any other way of referring to it. You'd use that to log into all of those things, and ideally, or at least one of the original visions for how this utility could be put to work was to start capturing the data from those systems that you're putting into them, so that if you were ever to lose access to that for this or that reason, you would still have it on your ship, that it couldn't be taken away from you. Imagine losing your blog or something like that.
Like so much of these arguments that we have right now, just the most topical one is Spotify should Spotify host Joe Rogan, and this is an absurd and stupid argument on several different levels, because at the end of the day, it's an issue of infrastructure, and what does it mean? Who's responsible for maintaining the reputation of Spotify? And let me put this a different way. Under an Urbit model, for example, so the issue with Joe Rogan and Spotify is Spotify could kick off Joe Rogan for saying bad things that the company disagrees with, or because the public disagrees with it. Now, there's a set number of platforms that Joe Rogan could conceivably go to, and I'm sure that if Spotify kicked him off, he would not have a problem finding one. However, there is a set number of those, and I'll just go ahead and say it's like less than 10, I think, where like I know that Alex Jones is banned from pretty much all of them. I think he literally has to host his own show on his own website now. And this question becomes, there's talk about regulation of these platforms, and what would that look like, and what would that mean, and how would that be enforced? And really, all of this is an infrastructure issue, because it is so complex and costly and time consuming to create the foundation to build something like Spotify, because the tech stack is just so overly complex. And if it was radically simple, if there was for example, Urbit is a federated system, so it goes galaxies. There's 256 galaxies that can each produce 256 stars, and each of these stars can produce 65,526 planets. So one conceivable business model is that, in addition to providing peer discovery, the stars could build infrastructure to allow for companies to specialize in stuff like podcasts or video games or something like that. And if this star did not like what Joe Rogan was saying, they could kick him off, and then Joe Rogan's planet, which he produces and speaks his mind from under his own identity, could simply move to a different star, one of the 65,000 plus stars that would be willing to take him. So there's a lot. So it's this question of voice over exit. If you have this huge number of choices of people that could host you, it no longer becomes a question of who holds the tools of censorship and how to regulate them. Does that make sense?
I buy that. I don't want to defend Joe Rogan, but I want to defend his right to say what he wants. And yeah, we see it time and again. We saw a couple of DAOs did kick out a couple of their founding members or their high team members. And it's that line between censorship and it's one of the biggest debates at the moment, right? And I think, and like you say, platforms like Spotify or most podcast ones, they've got such a heritage behind them and such large platforms, and such mass adoption, if you like, that and they have to protect their brand. whether it's, not to speak on Joe Rogan or Alex Jones specifically, but they have a right to say we don't agree with this, and we don't want you associated with our platform, and that's entirely fine. But then you cut out people's ways of communicating, and yeah, I mean, if you've got a baseline where, well, use the example of a planet, right? Like if it exists, and therefore, it just becomes a choice of, do people want to listen to you or not? I guess that's probably a freedom you're building towards.
Right, and just to give a more specific example, Twitter kicked the president of the United States off its platform. They banned him, and whatever the scenario that is, and whatever you think about the president, it's really, when it comes to something like that, the causes or the reasons, and even if it was for a good reason, that on a real polity level, that is a battle between two political power structures. Of you have a private company that can silence and censor the speech of the highest ranking person in the U.S. government, and again, whatever you think of the president personally, or whatever political party you happen to be in, that's not a structure that can last. That's not something that can that's not a that's a foundation built on sand. Like that there's no version of the future where that continues.
Yeah, all empires shall fall if they go too far down that route. I want to hear from Braden. You still there? You listening?
What do you want?
No. Hey, man, how are you?
I'm doing okay. So, hey, I guess one of the biggest questions I have is, to me, it sounds like Nevin wanted to talk about Urbit, like when we had him on the Lodge cast on the 14th. It sounded like he was talking about, everybody having their own personal server or something akin to that. So he kind of had this long, detailed thing that he was talking about, this concept of you hosting your own data and being able to interoperate with other people without anybody really being able to stop you. And it sounded like he was going to say, Urbit was going to be a part of that, based on, what Smeddy said earlier. And, obviously he's been to the Urbit conference. So what can you say about how Reserve and Urbit and how they fit together? How do you see that happening? What are the strengths Reserve can play off of for censorship resistance, etc.?
Oh, is this one for me or for Smeddy?
I think it's for you. It's a good
Yeah, I think it's definitely for you or Rabsef.
Oh, the only reason is I was wanting to at some point ask Smeddy what, because he offhandedly mentioned that Nevin had talked about Urbit quite a bit, which I found very interesting. But to answer your question, Urbit is literally a computer designed to last you the rest of your life. It is very much structured to last a very, very long time, and to be able to be built on and be unchanging in this way. So one one of the taglines for Urbit is a computer that will last the next 100 years. And one of the ways that Reserve describes itself is a currency that can outlive the empire that produced it, if I can paraphrase slightly. I think that it's an extremely natural pairing of these two things, of a stable, what one of the ways that we describe Urbit is calm. It is, as opposed to Twitter or Facebook, which has all these algorithms trying to get you clicking and making sure that you look at many ads as possible. Urbit is calm. I just saw Urbit tweet out, there's a little balloon in the Tlon office in San Francisco, and it says, "We are building the world's most boring computer." And that means that Urbit is a very calm, stable computer. And what I told Nevin when I met him is that I want to see, when someone buys an Urbit planet, that it has a Reserve wallet just built into it, that it's your computer, it's your interface into the larger world, both digital and real space, and it's universal in this way, in the same way that Reserve is a kind of global universal currency.
I mean, it seems like there's a lot of simpatico between the projects, right? I mean, I'm only going off what I saw from Nevin in a table a few times. So I think it was just along the lines of he's been a long time big admirer of Urbit, and I think he said, I mean, it's in the table, and I can't speak on his behalf, but I think he said, like, he doesn't mention it too often because it's his personal interest. But like everything you've just said, again, there's a lot of simpatico going on right there.
I've described my interest in Reserve as what I tell Urbit people is that Reserve is the only project I've seen in crypto that comes even close to having the ambition that Urbit has for how it would like to shape the world. And what I would say more generally is, I feel that Reserve and Urbit are the only two crypto projects. Urbit is crypto adjacent, but the only two projects that seem to really be taking things seriously in a way that's, I don't even know if I could describe it other than that they are taking things seriously. And if you mentioned that you were at ETH Denver, and that was I also stopped by ETH Denver, and that was my first time being around crypto people that were not Urbit people, and I was a little bit shocked at, there was a certain degree of child. Pardon me?
I know exactly where you're going. It was, well, I mean, like, when you cut through the noise, and it's exactly what kind of pulled me into Reserve in the first place, was just after it sat in my head for 6 months, it was like when you cut away everything, it's just looking to reinvent how we do things, and it doesn't really, it's being agnostic on, it's that long-term vision, and not a stupid one, not like, hey, we're Doge and we're going to be the world's future currency, just a very straightforward, pragmatic, we'll build something very slowly to last for many, many years, and we'll do it well so that we survive and thrive in the short term, but it's looking ahead to what that future looks like. But I found the same thing at F Denver, where quite often you would find very interesting and very intellectual, and very big brained discussions what was going on. But you would walk down the street and you would hear people go, "Oh yeah, we're going to be yield farming at 2,000%, and we're going to fix it." It was Yeah, I'll go back to what I said. It's cutting through the noise. Like everyone's crypto project is going to change the world, and every single one is going to go 1,000 times to the moon. And I mean, I found this massive disconnect between half the crowd acting like they were in a bubble, and then a smaller percentage actually really doing something quite novel and something that traditional, as we're talking crypto, traditional finance just could not do, and therefore was something to be interested in. But this is both for computers and for crypto. I think we've been in the teenage years, certainly for computers, for the last 20, 30 years, and crypto 10 years or so. And it's always, I mean, for me, it's about how do we want the world to look in about 20 years or so. And you said it earlier with, operating systems, we rely on 2 of them at the moment, or 3 or 4 of them. Yeah, and they are one company behind, well, Microsoft and Apple, what have you. Like we're very much in their hands at the moment, and it's been fine so far. And I've never seen too much bad intent other than to make a lot of money from the public. But these are things that we rely on nowadays. These are as fundamental. It's like, at some point someone's going to say the smartphone is a human right, and it wouldn't be far off, because a lot of people in Western worlds would be unable to exist for a few weeks without having access to, it's treating privacy and treating this stuff is serious.
I once bought a $10 smartphone. I happened to be in a like a Walmart, and I saw that this phone was $10, and I bought it purely so I could see what a $10 phone did. And it wasn't very fast, I'll say that, but like you could get on Google and you could read stuff. Like but it the smartphone is becoming ubiquitous, and it's there are 2 models of this that are possibly going to win, and that is corporate control of the data that people generate, which is the current US model, or the state control, which is China's model. That's why China cracked down on its tech companies recently, if you heard about that. And then you have Urbit, which is the third way.
Boom chicka bow. Anyone on the call? Anyone on the call got thoughts or questions?
So I guess like what I'm asking about, what Nevin had to say was, how is it technically possible on Urbit to carry out the theoretical thing he was talking about?
The theoretical thing to which you refer is just having your own server and being able to intercommunicate without the capacity for someone to rob you of that communication channel. Is that right?
Yeah, so it sounds a little bit like it's peer-to-peer networking, but for computers.
Yeah, it is, and I actually just posted something about that in the chat. The networking is baked in at the most basic of levels to the operating system, as is identity and therefore something like a namespace of parties that you could access and talk to. And so just to back up one step, to answer the question of how you could have that situation where everyone's on their server and no one could rob them of the ability to intercommunicate, that's just owning an Urbit generally. As Dash just pointed out earlier, if even so your star does some routing for you, if you have a problem with the proprietor of your star, you could move your ship to another star that does not doesn't provide you that same consternation. But additionally, it's very easy to work up new modes of communication on the network if you have to have some specific type of communication between these ships. For instance, we were just working, the team that I work on, we were just working on like ring signature, the ability to transmit messages via ring signatures so that you can't tell who's sending the message, but you can tell from what group of people the message came from. Those kinds of things are very easy to create and implement on Urbit because of the baked-in networking. So I don't know, does that get us closer to an answer?
Yes. Okay, so and then so like the next thing I start thinking of is, so can people attack, because like in order for you to communicate you have to go up levels, right? Or like if you had to connect to, if you were trying to transmit to somebody that was on another star, how could somebody attack your communication relay so that you couldn't attack? And like how quickly could you re reestablish your communication pathway with that person? How does that go about?
Right. Okay. So a couple of things. First, you do use the nodes that are structurally above you to discover other ships, but they don't have to be there to persist connections between ships. So your traffic isn't entirely routed through them. You can send directly to a ship, ship to ship at the planet level, but you have to know where they are. And so that routing part of like actually getting them on the Earth web as opposed to just the namespace is controlled or at least actualized by those higher level nodes. And then how quickly could you, the question is, how quickly could you notice and then realign? Easier to answer the second part first. Realigning under a star, under a different star, only requires that the person who will be taking you is willing to accept you. So it's two transactions against a contract, one to leave and one to accept you on the star's behalf. So you could do that, pretty quickly, like order of a few minutes, right? Noticing is, I guess it's harder to tell if you're just not receiving traffic from someone, or if they're trying to send you something and you're not getting it because somebody's blocking it. Sort of depends on like, did this attacker also block you from trying to transmit to them, or are your messages going through, thereby making the ruse more or less noticeable? That's a hard one to answer. I'm not sure how to answer how quickly could you notice.
Okay.
And then I guess you also asked what sorts of attacks could be in place. That's a pretty complicated question too, because though Urbit's been around as a project for a long time, I don't think that there's been a lot of effort expended to try and interrupt service like that. I think that's something that we'll need to do over time to figure out what kinds of attacks could be possible. But I mean, the base level networking is one of the core systems, so it's been pretty thoroughly reviewed to make sure that it operates as expected. So the most, what I'm getting at is the most likely attack would be that the routing node above you said, I'm not going to tell anyone where this planet is anymore, and I won't route any packets for them. And then maybe if you're running your Urbit at home, and you have a dynamic IP, and you lose or just there's a lapse in time, and you lose the kind of the socket that was open between you and the other Urbit that you were speaking with, you wouldn't be able to reach them anymore. So the most likely attack vector is that the star turns off routing for a specific planet. And then the resolution is, like I say, a 10-minute operation with you and some willing host. Ideally, probably with a group like yours, what you'd want to do is, I mean, you certainly wouldn't have to do this, but owning your own star then also makes it so that there's really no way of interfering with the communication between the nodes under that star. You might be blocked off from the rest of the network at that galactic level above that, but that again would be unlikely. And stars can move between galaxies as well.
Okay, so interesting. So, do you think it would be like a? I'm just trying to envision in my mind how like maybe Nevin is thinking about this, and so Nevin would want to either be aligned with a galaxy that is against censoring people, and would ideally probably have his own star, and then all reserve entities would be connected below that. What's the limit of connected individuals in a star and below it?
Well, I don't think that there's a hard limit, but they de facto come with 65,000 some odd planets underneath them.
Okay, and then
And
each
if I
planet
can
can have a
add,
whole bunch. Good.
if I can add some, under if reserve would be somehow added to this, you wouldn't really need, because reserve is its own blockchain, and what all you would really need for transactions between two planets is just a connection between these planets. So you use the stars for peer discovery, but once you have a connection to one planet and another, that's pure peer to peer, and you don't have to interact with that star again if you don't need to. So so the way, so conceivably, um you conceivably, literally every planet could receive every kind of R token that could be produced. There's no reason that it would not be able to accept certain R tokens. Now, what could conceivably happen, and there's interesting reasons this might happen, is that a galaxy could, which is sovereignly owned by a group of people, would want to produce, and a galaxy uh, holds close to, I don't know the exact number, but it's over 15 million planets. So that collection of 15 million people might want to, they would be able to produce their own R token that is backed up by collateral uh, from members of that galaxy or conceivably star. And you, this community that could be formed on this galaxy would trade it, would there might be an incentive to trade these R tokens within themselves, kind of like if there's been experiments done with like local currency in small towns in order to help keep money from flowing out of towns to stuff like Walmart and whatnot. Mm-hmm. There could be stuff like that, but on a much larger level. This is where you should read the Diamond Age, by the way.
I have it.
Yeah. So the way that I could foresee Urbit and Reserve working together is that Urbit provides the foundation for what we call DAOs right now are not really DAOs, not quite yet, because these DAOs exist on Discord, which is a company, and not a particularly nice one, that can kick you off at the moment's notice. This is what happened with the GameStop people, Wall Street Bets. I mean, that once they started interfering with the system, Citadel made a phone call and Discord kicked the Wall Street Bet server off. So if your DAO can be destroyed by Discord kicking you off, you don't really have a DAO. So Urbit can provide the foundation to create a truly sovereign DAO that can't be deplatformed, and Reserve could provide the ability of this DAO to print their own R tokens, their own currency that would represent the DAO as a whole.
Okay. So, and that all makes sense. How does the data physically, or I'm not sorry, physically, but getting a little bit of feedback here. How does the data get from one individual to another?
Over a protocol called AIMS. AIMS is the networking layer of the Martian stack. So we have a lot of different terminology for things that is silly, but there are different, modules of the kernel, and one of them is AIMS, and it handles all of that communication. It in practice today functions over UDP, but it could function over any protocol for sending that information. Does that answer?
So there is still, and I'm like a networking newbie, and really,
Yep.
there's still some central entity that is taking that data and eventually giving it to the other person. And so while it may be like
No.
encrypted and everything, okay, go ahead. This is what I'm trying to grasp.
Yeah.
And thank you.
I gotcha. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. And the answer is, it is possible that that's necessary, but not necessary at all times. There is a circumstance where, so imagine that I have my Urbit running on my laptop and Dashus has his on a server. Dashus's ship is pretty static. We know where it is. We can find it in UDP land and send stuff to it, right? We know where it exists. My laptop, however, could pop up anywhere on the globe, and for Dashus to talk back to me, he needs to know where I am, and he doesn't want to have to keep track of each of the, whatever it is, 4 billion or something planets, right? Like individually at all times, and try and ping them constantly. And so we have this hierarchical setup that allows us to transport that "where am I right now" information vertically up and then back down as necessary. So there's a circumstance where an initial packet to reach someone, or maybe, well, let's just keep it at the simple case. There's an initial case where you may need to find someone. That information may be transported, and some information may be transported by a star between planets, but there could also be a direct pathway between them if they know where each other are.
Okay, that makes sense.
That makes sense?
Okay. Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I'm gonna have to jump off in a minute or two, but I'm really keen to ask this question. Like, so on the whole, it's built on, was it 30,000 lines of code? And if we go back, how will you manage the kind of the evolution of Urbit over the years without compromising in any ways? I mean, let's take Microsoft as an example, right? I figure spotty face Bill Gates in 1983 was doing something really genuine, but jump forward 20 and then 30 years, and Microsoft's gargantuan. It's a huge company with lots of different aims, and obviously it's, time may come where as a company, if you like, you may have to work out things like monetization or different suggestions come along. Like, is Urbit fixed now, sort of in terms of its coding, to last for the long term, or will it need to adapt and change, and how will that sort of go? It's quite a speculative question, but
no, it's a great question. Let me, if Dashus, do you mind if I try and take a crack at that?
I was so excited when he started asking. Yes, absolutely, go for it.
Okay, so like, it is true that computing will change over time, and no one can know what that topology will look like, right? Like, we don't know how things are going to go in the future, or what people might want to do, or what interesting ways people might want to compute. But the very interesting thing about Urbit for me is that the central computing device, the Urbit itself, the part that's being developed that might change, is being developed in a way that it's being developed inverted from the modality that you imagine. So rather than thinking about needing to change the operating system to compete with the times, the goal is to produce a series of foundational building blocks that are sufficient for all modes of general computing, and then allow users, then lock that in place as permanent so that users can experiment on top of that. You could imagine like a great jazz musician is able to play their saxophone in these interesting and novel ways that you might not learn in classical lessons, because the device is the same and the chops are the same from when they took those classical lessons themselves. Changing the underlying computing modality makes everything more complicated and gets us this like sort of unstable stack of competing and interconnected parts that we have now. But having a rigorous core to Urbit is the inverse of that and allows the experimentation and the flourish to happen in the production of interesting softwares at that peer-to-peer level. That's the thing that that's one of the things that makes me most excited about Urbit. And so it's very fortuitous that you asked that question for me.
And just to add real fast, the way that we do that on a concrete term is that Urbit uses something called Kelvin versioning. So the Urbit, the lower level language Knock, it is at a certain point in the future, it will be locked and it will be unable to be changed. So we use something called Kelvin versioning, which is it. I'm trying to remember exactly because I'm an American. I don't want to say it's Fahrenheit, but Kelvin versioning is like absolute zero is the coldest it can ever go, and the coldest point possible. That's the void of space. So at a certain point, Knock has, I think we're at 6 degrees above absolute zero. So there are 6 more instances that Knock could be changed, the lower level language, before it will be locked and it cannot be changed again. Now, someone could create an entirely new kind of Knock based on the mathematics of that, but Knock itself will be locked in a state that can't be changed. So long as it remains static, it can be learned and built upon.
Nice. That's great. That's a great answer. It's something for me to digest a little bit. So, I am gonna have to hop off now. I'm a few minutes late to a meeting, and I've probably used up my generosity. Probably if I'm 10 minutes late, I'm probably gonna get a rap on the knuckles. So I'm going to jump off, but carry on chatting, and that's been awesome. I'm probably going to follow up with some text questions tomorrow or something. But you two, thank you both. That's really great. I'm going to be down some rabbit holes, I think, the next day or two. I'll go off now, but carry on, please.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great.
Braden, Z, I'll stay on a little bit. If y'all have some more questions, and Rabsef is of course welcome to stay if he is free.
Yeah, I'm happy to hang around for a while. I was just going to say there's a project where somebody is trying to produce another version of Knock with piano numbers, and I don't really understand the math that goes into it, but there are people trying to iterate on it. So
Jesus.
And it's possible to fork the network too.
That's like the Urbit equivalent of playing Dark Souls with bananas.
So what you're saying about the language is that version 0 or 1 is basically the most simplest version that that there is, and then each version above that gets more complicated and has more features added onto it. Correct?
No, no. Think about it this way. You could imagine that every time Windows issues a new version, you get new features and stuff baked into Windows, right? Like you get the start menu and Cortana and whatever, right? But the way that Urbit is being versioned is where, when I say we, I mean the team at Tlon, and so I'm not actually a member of Tlon, but I'm speaking as them in this case. We're trying to build the perfect set of tools to allow any user to create a computing application, be that something like Windows, very complex, or a simple thing like something for, like I said, sending a ring signature or whatever. What Kelvin versioning does is it says we're going to count down from an arbitrarily large number, like 100 or whatever, and every time we change this thing, we're going to bring it down one. So we better be damn sure that our changes are sensible and right. And when we get to 0, no more changes, which means that any programmer in that environment now has a stable set of axioms on which they can build their program.
Interesting.
And if I can just add, like, wax philosophically about the reason for that, is that it is the nature of perfect things not to change. And Rabsef mentioned something earlier called Martian computing, and the lore of Urbit, and this is why it's so radically different, is imagine an alien spaceship landed on Earth, and we had the chance to examine its programming. We would most likely find that Martian computing stopped at a certain point, like that it advanced as far as it perfected it to the point where there was no longer any need to change it. They eventually just got it right, and there was no longer any need to innovate. There might be small cosmetics or added things, but the based on taste or preference, but the foundation was perfect. And because an example of a perfect thing, you might be checkers, for example, could be considered a perfect game because it has remained functionally unchanged for thousands of years. We've literally found Vikings buried with checkerboards. Sumo wrestling is considered a perfect game, because a perfect sport, because it has remained unchanged. An example of a tool that could arguably be considered perfect is the AK-47, and there's a reason that, like, that design is so ubiquitous, and the AK-47 is one of the most perfectly designed tools ever created. So at a certain point, knock will be refined to the point where we can say, if this is not perfect, this is the closest that imperfect hands can come to making it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it. It's like a fork or a knife or hot dogs. Like they're not going to radically change. And the machinery that we have built to make those things is basically reduced down to the most, or it's distilled to its most simple and effective form to produce those items, or for use. And so yeah, I mean the same could be said about computing. It's like the hot dog of computing. I'm joking, obviously, um, but yeah, I mean, no, it sounds very good, and I'm glad you guys came on here to give a little bit more perspective on it. One thing, and I want Z to ask questions, but I just want to ask you guys this and hear your response. So, if you could imagine R tokens being, let's say there's a billion people that are using R tokens on chain, and they're using the Reserve app. So the Reserve app is, let's say, on Urbit, and so what happens is you go to download the app from the Google Play Store, or maybe it's just installed default on your phone, whatever. But how do you maintain your data? How does the layout look for a billion users using Reserve and having an Ethereum address? How does that look for you guys in terms of like, is that possible that there can be a billion or 6 billion people? And I know you said, Facebook has only, been so many people, but let's just take it to the, like a logical number of 10 billion. How do you get 10 billion people, on Urbit, with the Ethereum address as everything?
Well, first off, Urbit predates Ethereum by quite a bit, and we happen to use Ethereum for the address space right now, but we're likely to move off of that at some point. And again, there's a native blockchain project for Urbit being built called Ukbar. So, but first, let me see if I'm understanding your question, because I don't think I don't think I'm quite following you. You said something about the data of the whole idea of Urbit is that Urbit is a sovereign computer. So the state of Urbit, excuse me, the state of your Urbit planet is the total of all. Rabsef might have to help me here. Not
It's just a
transactions.
tree of all of your data and all of your programs, because programs are data on Urbit. So data is executable, and executable code is data. So the state of your Urbit is you could say, Dashus, from, if you imagine a Windows computer the first time you boot it, right? The state of your computer is whatever's on the screen, or whether it's on or off based on your inputs thereafter. And the way Urbit kind of works is it records, what's on screen, if we follow that metaphor, and also all of the clicks or key presses or whatever that led to the current state from effectively a clean slate. So like that would be called your event log, and your event log is a series of events and effects that have been emitted from your ship. When you reboot your ship, sometimes it'll run from the last checkpoint and just go through those events and go, okay, right, my state's like this. I have it all caught up. I guess if I were to answer your question, how would you maintain the state of a large number of users? I think the thing to remember is that RSR and R tokens are going to exist outside of Urbit on Ethereum. So all you really need is a solid application that's well distributed amongst those users to interact with that Ethereum blockchain. And that works like, I'm hesitant to say already done, but it's well underway. That's well trodden ground. We know how to build agents that interact with the Earth web. So that would just look like downloading an application on your phone, only you would be doing it on your Urbit. And even the experience is very similar. Now we have a phone app called Escape. From the homepage of Escape, you can see all of your Urbit applications that you have as little tiles, just like you would on like iPhone. You click on one and it opens that up. Anything that you do to interact with that platform there is recorded again as events and changes to your state. And those kind of go straight into your Urbit as part of its operating. So just like an an Earth computer, the things that you do on it are recorded as changes to the output.
Okay. I'm probably gonna have to listen to that again. So
I think I can try and let me say it a different way.
what I'm
You
saying is
don't
I'm
need
recording
to.
this so I can listen to it again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me, if you don't mind, I want to reapproach anyway because I think I've said it kind of poorly. You don't need to reproduce the state of the Ethereum blockchain on Urbit in order to maintain meaningfully information about your interactions with the Ethereum blockchain on your Urbit in a way that is private and safe and yours and permanent. My team is actually working right now on a grant. We just accepted it today. A grant to build a program that'll allow you to kind of point your Urbit to a number of wallet addresses that you point out, maybe cross chain, and then give you the capacity to annotate permanently and in a private record, as mentioned, transactions coming from or going to those wallet addresses that you put in. So this might help you with things like taxes or just record keeping of any sort. And so that would be similar to the interaction. It's not going to copy the Ethereum blockchain, but it's going to watch it and notice transactions coming from your wallets, and then help you record that information, that metadata about those blockchain transactions.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for indulging me.
And just to get a little like theoretical for the way that like R tokens would work, again, it might be that a star or a galaxy would be the one that uh, managed the production and the stabilization of certain R tokens for either everyone on their galaxy or on behalf of a DAO or whatever community forms. And so if there would need to be a record of something like that, then that's what the hierarchical federated model of galaxy, star, planet works for, or is designed to do, is that these larger nodes would take on the responsibility of designing the infrastructure to do that, if that was required.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's there's another one way that Dashus, you've talked about the layer one that's coming onto Urbit Akbar, and one way that they've kind of been marketing themselves also is allowing you to, since that will be a blockchain that is native to the system and supported by the infrastructure nodes, the stars and galaxies, who will be recording the state, it would allow planets to securely transact wholly within Urbit, and then you could do something like a roll up, or the nodes could broadcast transactions to the mainnet. Ideally, you'd want to do a roll up so that you're saving some gas fees, so that you're doing this for a reason rather than just because you can. But you could create an ecosystem of inter-ship transactions using RSR through like effectively what would be like wrapped RSR, or not RSR, but your R tokens, whatever we're talking about, whatever mode of transaction you're doing, you could have those sort of wrapped in the native block system, and then those could get rolled up to their own native blockchains outside of Urbit on some occasional basis, so that you could have more immediate transactions in network. This is very similar to what's happening well, yeah, it's very similar to what's happening in Lightning, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
Z, I've never actually heard you talk at any of these things. Do you have any questions?
Z is actually more.
Oh, so he's not going to say anything.
Maybe he's still in the connecting phase, and he's just like, it's just a ghost. I don't know if he's actually here. Oh no, he's typing.
Wait, but he could hear that.
Yeah, apparently. I'm gonna mute and then unmute you. I can't do remove you from chat because that's actually remove you from the lodge. So try unmuting your microphone now.
All right, I'm going to take off in a minute, Dashus. Unless anyone else have any questions. Oh, looks like Z was able to join there.
Your microphone lit up for a second.
Yeah, it looked like that worked. All right, I'm gonna take off, but Dashus, if you need anything, you know how to get me. Let me know, and I'll pop back in here. Okay?
All right, cheers. Thanks, man.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys. Bye.
Take it easy, man.
So, did you have any other questions? Because if not, I'm going to go back to playing Elden Ring. Oh wait, see,
I could hear myself through Z's mic.
I guess he really is just like lurking.
Yeah, it's okay then. Yeah, all right. Well, that it sounds like that's it. What I'll do is I'll send you the MP3 file of this recording, and you can tell me if you want me to upload it or not. It's up to you, but it was hard. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around like the implementation of how reserve embodies itself, because I don't think you would be able to. Well, I mean, maybe you could, I guess, but like if you install reserve, like what happens for like your mom if she installs reserve, or some random guy's mom goes to install the reserve app on her phone when it's running on Urbit. What does that look like in the transaction system, in terms of like, do they get a planet? um, can they run off of somebody else's planet? Can that phone be a satellite off of somebody else's planet, or a moon? That's what I'm trying to figure out is like, and does that have a fundamental limit where it can be attacked, or there can only be so many people that can connect to a certain place, and then what happens where like somebody tries to get the reserve ecosystem off of the internet or something like that. I mean, not even the internet, but you know what I mean. It's like they're trying to get it off of the Google Play Store, or is there some sort of central authority? If people are moving around, like you're saying, where their location has to be updated, is there any sort of attack vector in which people can limit the effectiveness and transmissibility of our tokens?
Is there any? Is there any way that there is an attack vector where people can limit the transmissibility of R tokens on Urbit? Is that the question?
Yes.
Not that I can really think of, because what it would just be a wallet, and we already have a Bitcoin wallet on Urbit, and there's more wallets being built right now, and I would like to see a reserve wallet on Urbit, and it would just be a just a wallet for uh your RSV or whatever token, and that you would be able to send it to other planets. And I
But
mean, like
but your
we already.
planet, your planet is what holds the wallet, correct?
Sorry, I was muted. There is a section of Urbit called Vault, which is cryptographically secure, and that's currently being audited. Um, so it's used right now, but I wouldn't put any crypto. Like, you can use it right now, but I wouldn't put any crypto on it until the security audit is finished. But it is a subsection of Urbit that is cryptographically secure,
Okay.
and that's where. So uh, so an Urbit planet is a digital server. So, and all of your different devices are hardware devices that are moons that feed in the data to your Urbit planet. So your Urbit planet is uh, at all times in a constant state of becoming the sum total of the data of all of your hardware devices. So to answer your question about your how it would work conceivably with someone's mom, is that in all honesty, the mom if the mom is not going to run her own Urbit planet, which she could, there's no reason. It's designed to be simple enough that she could. How it could be that uh, if you wanted to set up if you wanted to set an Urbit up for your grandmother, what you would do is, what might be easiest to do for you is to spawn a moon off of your own planet, and then that becomes the Urbit on her phone. And that way, if she locks herself out, or if she forgets the password, you can help manage it from your own planet.
Okay.
And so when you talk about like attack vectors, if they're the thing is with this is any ways that would stifle reserves ability to transmit uh R tokens, that would be on like the side of reserve. That would be its issue. I really just don't see the only way I could conceivably think of a way that just trying to think of something is, there might be a scenario where let's say that someone tries to set up a Silk Road on Urbit, and this is why it would actually be a pretty bad idea to do it on Urbit, because your identity has value and it's consistent. It is anonymous, but there is still a reputation to it, and it doesn't. Urbit doesn't do anything to hide your IP address. So it could be that a DAO uh, gets flagged as doing illicit or illegal activity, or that it could just be sending spam or something. There is what Urbit allows for people to do is that they can create blacklists that people can choose to subscribe to or not. So if there is a community using R tokens to, say, purchase drugs, and that it became well known that this specific group of Urbit planets or even a star or a galaxy was behaving in this way, there could be a general agreement. And there's something called the Galactic Senate that would vote on this to censor this galaxy or star, which would make it so where that the rest of those planets, so that planets and stars underneath and galaxies that censor this planet will no longer receive data from that section of the Urbit universe. So they would be completely cut off and cloistered in their own um, part of the Urbit network. Now those planets would still be free to leave the stars that had been censored if they could find a star that could take them, and it might, like the stars themselves might we've described it like the stars of that galaxy that got censored could sell themselves at a discounted price, and it could be very clearly labeled, this is a business that is now under new management. It's the way I heard it described, that was the funniest, was it's like buying a house where there has been a murder in it. It's a bit of a stain on its record, but people buy houses like that all the time. So your question was, how is there a way that R tokens could conceivably be stifled in some way? That's the only way off the top of my head that Urbit could conceivably affect the trading of R tokens, but that would only be in a very, very specific situation where a problem got bad enough where it was like, again, like running drugs or doing other illegal stuff, that and even then the problem is a fixable one. So that was my closest way of trying to conceive of a way that R tokens could be stifled.
Okay. Yeah, it's going to take a little bit to digest all this, but I think you guys have really answered the question, the best that it can be answered. So thank you. And now I'll let Z talk.
Cheers.
It sounds like he's ready. Z, just for what it's worth, what you do is you open your mouth and you kind of like breathe really hard. It's kind of weird at first.
It's like a controlled whistling.
Yeah.
It's like whistling but deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Chad, what about you? What do you think?
Riveting.
Agreed. Well said. All right.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fun. I'm going to go back to playing Elden Ring.
All right, man.
I'll see you at the thing tomorrow.
Yeah, take it easy. Have fun.
Cheers.